son-in-law Ray stood at the head of the table at my 70th birthday dinner and raised his glass and said, "To Stuart, to everything he built, to the legacy he leaves behind." He said it with the particular warmth of someone who has rehearsed the warmth and who has calculated, precisely, what effect the warmth is intended to produce. I have been in business for 35 years, and I know what a prepared speech sounds like when the preparation has been done for reasons other than the ones stated. I raised my glass. I looked at my daughter Brenda, who was seated to Ray's left and who was looking at her father with the expression of someone who loves two people who are in a room together and who does not know that the room is more complicated than it appears. I looked at my son Marcus, who was seated across the table and who had flown in from Phoenix for the occasion and who was watching Ray with the mild attentiveness of a man who has never fully trusted his sister's husband but who has never been able to name exactly why. I raised my glass and I drank and I smiled at Ray and I thought about the documents I had filed 3 weeks earlier in the county recorder's office and with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and with the attorney who had been my attorney for 22 years and who had moved with the particular efficiency of a man who understands that some things require speed above all else. I thought about all of that and I smiled at my son-in-law and I said, "Thank you, Ray. That means a great deal." He nodded. He believed me. He had no reason not to believe me. This is the story of what happens when a son-in-law mistakes a generous man for a simple one. My name is Stuart Callum. I am 70 years old. I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, the son of a wholesale grocery distributor who believed that the most important thing in any business relationship was the quality of what you were selling and the reliability with which you delivered it, and who spent 40 years building a reputation in the regional food distribution business on those two principles alone. I did not go into grocery distribution. I went into something adjacent, which my father considered a reasonable evolution, and which my mother considered a somewhat exotic choice for a boy from Charlotte, North Carolina. In 1988, at the age of 33, I founded Callum Imports, a specialty tea and coffee import business that I built from a storage unit in a warehouse district of Charlotte and a list of 14 prospective clients I had assembled over 3 years of research into the premium beverage market. The business was not complicated. I identified exceptional tea and coffee producers in underrepresented regions, established direct relationships, and supplied their products to clients who valued quality over price. By the time I retired, Callum Imports had grown from 14 clients to 211, from a storage unit to a proper facility with 7 employees, and from a single product line to 14 programs sourced from 11 countries. The business's most valuable assets were not its inventory or its facility or its supplier relationships, though all of those had value. Its most valuable assets were its trademark, under which all of its products were sold and under which 35 years of quality reputation had accumulated, and its client list, which was not merely a database of names but a set of relationships built on personal trust and consistent delivery over periods ranging from 3 years to the full 35. I sold the business's operations 4 years ago to a specialty beverage company in Atlanta, retaining the trademark and the client list. The Atlanta company leases the right to use them under an agreement that pays me an annual licensing fee contingent on maintaining my quality standards. The trademark and client list are what I built. My wife Catherine passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, swift and final. She was 66 years old and we had been married for 43 years and she had been, in every practical sense, the person who made the business possible in its early years, who kept the books and managed the supplier contracts, and who had, with the particular talent she had for relationships, turned many of our early clients from customers into something closer to friends. After Catherine passed, I continued to live in the house in Myers Park. I managed the licensing agreement, the trademark portfolio, and the client relationships I maintained personally, and watched my daughter's marriage with the particular mixture of hope and unease that a parent feels when they are not entirely certain about their child's spouse. Brenda is my daughter. She is 44 years old. She has Catherine's warmth and my stubbornness, which is a combination I have always found both admirable and occasionally frustrating in her, and which she has deployed throughout her adult life with the directness of someone who knows her own mind and is not inclined to conceal it. She and Ray have been married for 9 years. Ray is 47 years old and he works in brand consulting, which is a profession that I understand in its broad outlines and that I have come to understand more specifically over the course of knowing Ray, which is to say that brand consulting involves identifying the value embedded in names and reputations and finding ways to extract or leverage that value for clients who are willing to pay for the expertise. Ray is good at his work. I have recognized a genuine talent for understanding what makes something valuable and what can be done with that value. What I noticed in the 3 years following Catherine's passing was that he had begun applying those skills to Callum Imports in ways that went beyond professional curiosity. He asked about the trademark, the client list, the licensing agreement. He offered twice to review the trademark portfolio from a brand consulting perspective. I declined politely. I did not need a brand consultant for a portfolio I understood better than anyone alive. 3 years after Catherine's death, I understood that Ray had not stopped asking those questions. He had simply stopped asking them of me. The first sign came on a Thursday morning in October, when I was reviewing the annual trademark renewal documentation that my attorney Roger Hess had sent for my signature. Roger had been my attorney for 22 years. He had handled every significant legal matter related to Callum Imports, and every personal legal matter of consequence since I had hired him in 2002. He was 63 and meticulous, and he had a practice of including in his renewal packages not only the documents requiring signature, but a complete status report on all trademark registrations and any activity associated with them. The status report for October included a notation that I had not expected. A trademark application had been filed 3 months earlier for a mark described as Callum Reserve, to be used in connection with specialty tea and coffee products. The application had been filed by a company registered in Delaware called RB Brand Holdings, LLC. I did not recognize the company name. The trademark Callum Reserve was not a mark I had filed and was not covered by my existing trademark portfolio. The word Callum in a specialty tea and coffee context was, however, closely associated with 35 years of reputation that I had built under the Callum Imports mark. I called Roger. He said, "Stuart, I saw this yesterday. I was going to call you this morning. Do you know anything about RB Brand Holdings?" I said, "No." He said, "I've pulled the Delaware registration. The registered agent is a formation service, which is standard. The managing member listed in the operating agreement is Raymond Bernard Whitaker. Raymond Bernard Whitaker. Ray's full name." I was quiet for a moment. Roger said, "Stuart." I said, "I heard you." He said, "There's more." I pulled the application more carefully. The specimen of use they submitted with the application, which is supposed to show the mark in commerce, is a photograph of one of your existing product packaging designs with Callum Reserve substituted for Callum Imports. I said, "He used my packaging." Roger said, "A modified version of it." Yes. I sat at my desk in the study in Myers Park and I looked at the certificates on the wall. 35 years of trademark registrations in frames that Catherine had chosen because she thought the certificates deserved proper presentation and not just a folder in a drawer. I said, "Roger, what do we need to do and how quickly can we do it?" He said, "We file an opposition to the Callum Reserve application immediately. We also need to look at what else RB Brand Holdings might have filed or attempted to register. And we need to understand the client list." I said, "The client list." He said, "If Ray has been in contact with your licensed clients presenting himself as an authorized extension of the Callum brand, that is a separate problem from the trademark application." I said, "How do I find that out?" He said, "Call your clients." I spent the following week calling every client on the list, not all 211, the 43 I maintained personal relationships with. The ones who had been with Callum Imports long enough to know my voice and who would tell me honestly if something unusual had happened. 11 of them had been contacted by a representative of something called Callum Reserve over the previous 4 months. The representative had described Callum Reserve as a new premium tier of the Callum Imports family of products, had provided samples of product, and had invited them to enter into a supply agreement with Callum Reserve at terms described as exclusive and advantageous. 3 of the 11 had signed letters of intent. I called Roger. I said, "We have a fraud." He said, "I know. I've been building the file." Roger worked for 3 weeks. What he assembled was thorough. The trademark opposition was filed within 48 hours of my call. It established prior use, prior registration, and likelihood of confusion between Callum Reserve and Callum Imports, and it cited the fraudulent specimen of use as evidence of bad faith in the original application. The USPTO examiner assigned to the case responded within 10 days with a suspension of the Callum Reserve application pending resolution of the opposition. The client contact campaign was documented. Roger obtained written statements from 7 of the 11 clients who had been approached, each confirming the nature of the contact and the representations made about Callum Reserve's relationship to Callum Imports. 3 of those clients confirmed that the representative who had contacted them had identified himself as the brand director of the Callum family of products. Brand director. Ray's job title in his own consulting firm was Managing Director of Brand Strategy. Roger also found the Delaware operating agreement for RB Brand Holdings in full. The company had been formed 14 months earlier. Its stated purpose was the development and commercialization of specialty beverage brands. Its initial capitalization had come from a personal contribution of $60,000 from Raymond Bernard Whitaker. 14 months. Ray had been building this for 14 months. The final piece Roger found was a term sheet, unsigned, between RB Brand Holdings and a specialty beverage distributor in Atlanta, describing a proposed acquisition of the Callum Reserve trademark and associated client relationships for a purchase price of $400,000, contingent on the trademark application being granted. $400,000. 14 months of work. Using my name, my packaging, my clients, and my 35 years of reputation, I sat with all of this for 2 days before I decided what to do. Then I called Marcus. Marcus is my son. He is 42 years old and he lives in Phoenix, where he runs a logistics company that he founded 8 years ago and that has grown with the steady consistency of a business built on operational competence rather than market. Timing. He has my father's work ethic and Catherine's patience, and a quality of directness that he has never moderated for anyone's comfort, including mine. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is not his natural disposition, but which he managed for the full 40 minutes it took me to describe what Roger had found. When I finished, he said, "How long has this been going on?" I said, 14 months minimum, probably longer in the planning stages. He said, "Dad, he did this while you were still grieving, Mom." I said, "Yes." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I have already done most of it. The trademark is protected. The client letters of intent are unenforceable because they were obtained by misrepresentation. Roger is preparing a cease and desist for the client solicitation campaign," Marcus said. "And Brenda?" I said, "I don't know how much she knows." He said, "Do you think she was involved?" I said, "No, I don't believe she was involved. I believe she may have been aware that Ray was developing something related to the Callum brand. I don't believe she understood what it was." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, what do you need from me?" I said, "Come to Charlotte for my birthday. Be there." He said, "When?" I said, 3 weeks. The birthday dinner was at the house in Myers Park, 32 people. Family and close friends and a few of the long-standing clients whom I had known long enough to consider friends. Catherine would have organized it differently, but Roger's wife Janet had helped, and the result was good. Ray had been friendly throughout the evening. He had helped with the drinks and talked to Marcus with the practiced ease of a man who has always been better at surface than depth and who has learned to deploy that ease in situations that require it. He had not given any indication that he knew his trademark application had been suspended or that Roger had been building a file for 3 weeks. He did not know I knew. He had not known I knew from the moment I called Roger 3 weeks earlier. And I had chosen to let him not know because there was information I was still gathering and because I had learned, in 35 years of importing products that traveled through multiple countries and multiple hands, that the best time to address a problem is when you understand it completely and not before. When Ray stood and raised his glass and gave his toast about legacy, I was sitting at the head of my own table on my 70th birthday, and I was listening to my son-in-law describe, in the warm language of tribute, the value of what I had built and the importance of honoring it. I raised my glass. I thought about the opposition filing, about the client statements, about the term sheet with the Atlanta distributor, about 14 months of careful work designed to take the name I had spent 35 years building and sell it to someone else for $400,000. I drank. I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Ray. That means a great deal." He smiled back. He believed me. After the guests had gone and Brenda and Ray were preparing to leave, I said to Ray, "Would you be able to come by tomorrow morning? There are some business matters I'd like your perspective on." He said, "Of course." He seemed pleased to be asked. He said 10 o'clock. He arrived at 10 o'clock the following morning. I had made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table in Myers Park, and I put Roger's file on the table between us. I said, "Ray, I want to give you the opportunity to explain this before I tell you what I have." He looked at the file. His expression did not change immediately. He was good at composure, which is a professional skill in brand consulting and which had served him well for the 9 years I had known him. He said, "What is that?" I said, "It is a comprehensive record of what you have been doing for the past 14 months under the name Callum Reserve through a Delaware company called RB Brand Holdings." A silence. He said, "Stewart," I said, "I know about the trademark application. I know about the client solicitation. I know about the term sheet with the Atlanta distributor. I know about the $60,000 you put into the company formation. I know about the specimen of use you submitted to the USPTO, which was a modified version of my packaging. I know about all of it." He looked at the file. I said, "The trademark application has been suspended pending opposition. The opposition was filed 3 weeks ago, and it will prevail because the application was made in bad faith using fraudulent specimens. The letters of intent your clients signed are unenforceable because the representations made to obtain them were false. The term sheet with the Atlanta distributor is moot because you have nothing to sell them." He said nothing. I said, "What I want to know is what you believed you were doing." He said, "I thought." He stopped. He started again. "I thought you were going to sell the trademark eventually. I thought I could build something around it that would make the sale more valuable. I thought you'd see it as adding value." I said, "You thought you would build something using my name and my clients and my packaging without telling me and then present it to me as an improvement." He said, "It sounds worse when you say it that way." I said, "It sounds exactly like what it is." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to tell you what is going to happen. Roger is filing the formal cease and desist today, covering all client solicitation and all use of the Callum name in any commercial context not authorized by me. RB Brand Holdings will dissolve, or you will face a trademark infringement action that will cost you significantly more than $60,000. The Atlanta term sheet is already void. None of this requires your agreement because I have the legal standing to do all of it without your cooperation." He said, "And Brenda?" I said, "Brenda is my daughter. What happens between you and Brenda is between you and Brenda. But she will know the truth about what you did because she deserves to know it, and because I am not willing to protect her from accurate information about her husband's conduct." He said, "She didn't know." I said, "I know she didn't. That is not the same as her not needing to know." He looked at the file, at the coffee going cold between his hands. At the table where I had eaten breakfast with Catherine for 26 years, he said, "I thought it was going to be mine eventually anyway." I said, "Ray, nothing is anyone's eventually until it actually is. The trademark is mine, the client list is mine, the name Callum in the context of specialty tea and coffee is mine. I built it for 35 years. The eventually you were counting on has not arrived, and it will not arrive on a timeline you control." He nodded. It was not the nod of a man who had been persuaded. It was the nod of a man who had run out of road. I said, "You should go." He went. Brenda called me that evening. Ray had told her when he got home. I do not know exactly what he had told her, but it was enough, because her voice when she called had the particular quality of someone who has just understood something she had been not quite allowing herself to understand. She said, "Dad, did you know at the party?" I said, "Yes." She said, "You raised your glass." I said, "I had already done everything I needed to do." The toast didn't change anything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." She said, "I knew he was working on something. He said it was a new client project." "I didn't know it was." She stopped. I didn't ask enough questions. I said, "Brenda, you trusted your husband. That is not a failure. What he did with that trust is his failure, not yours." She said, "What happens now?" I said, "Between you and Ray, that is your decision to make. Between Ray and the business, Roger has handled it. Between you and me, nothing has changed, and nothing will change." She said, "Dad." I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "You have nothing to apologize for." Marcus flew back to Phoenix the morning after the party. He called from the airport. He said, "How did it go?" I said, "As expected." He said, "Is Brenda okay?" I said, "She will be." He said, "What about Ray?" I said, "Ray is going to have to decide who he wants to be." The Callum Reserve trademark application was formally rejected 4 months after the opposition was filed. RB Brand Holdings was dissolved. The Atlanta term sheet expired without execution. The 3 clients who had signed letters of intent with Callum Reserve received letters from Roger confirming that no such entity was authorized to use the Callum name or represent Callum clients, and that their existing relationships with Callum Imports remained in good standing. 2 of the 3 clients called me personally to apologize for having been misled. I told them there was nothing to apologize for. Brenda and Ray are still married. I do not know the full shape of what happened between them in the months following the party, and I have not asked because it is not mine to know. What I observe is that Ray has not raised the subject of Callum Imports or its trademark in my presence since the morning at the kitchen table, which suggests he has understood something about where those conversations end. The licensing agreement with the Atlanta company continues. The trademark and client list continue to generate income. 35 years of reputation continue to be worth what 35 years of reputation is worth, which is to say exactly what the market says it is worth when the person selling it is the person who built it. I am 70 years old. I spent 35 years importing things of quality from places that took them seriously and selling them to people who understood what they were paying for. The most important thing I learned in that business was that provenance matters. Where something comes from, how it was made, who stood behind it. These things are not incidental to its value. They are its value. Ray understood this intellectually. He did not understand it in the way that mattered, which is to say he did not understand that the provenance of the Callum name was inseparable from the person who had built it, and that any attempt to separate the name from the person would diminish both. He thought he could take the name and leave me behind and sell what remained to someone in Atlanta for $400,000. He could not. The name without the history behind it is not the same thing as the name with the history. Any experienced buyer would have understood this eventually. The Atlanta term sheet would have collapsed even if Roger had not filed the opposition. What I want to say to you, if you are a person whose name represents something that you built over years or decades, and you have found that someone close to you has been calculating what that name is worth without your knowledge, is this. The calculation they are doing is incomplete. They are calculating the market value of the name. They are not calculating the irreplaceable source of that value, which is you and your history and your relationships and your continued willingness to stand behind what you built. Those things cannot be transferred. They cannot be purchased. They can only be earned, over time, by doing what you did. Know what you have, know what it is, and know the difference between someone who wants to honor it and someone who wants to take it. That difference is almost always visible if you are paying attention. I was paying attention. I have always been paying attention. That is not a talent, it is a practice. And it is available to anyone who decides that what they have built is worth the effort of protecting it. The birthday toast was beautiful. Ray delivered it well. I raised my glass and I meant what I said when I thanked him. The papers were already filed. Tell me in the comments. Has someone ever tried to profit from something you built without asking your permission? I want to hear from you.